Hello, brothers and sisters. I've been given a few more dreams last night that I'd like to share with you. And then I've also been being shown quite a lot of sacred geometry compared to the Bible and different structures. And I'd like to go more in depth in that. And so let's get to my timeline real quick. All right, coming up here to July 11th. So fourth month, on Tammuz 1, Noah would see the top of the mountains. The first day of the fourth month, in 40 days, he'd send out the raven and dove out of the window of the ark. 40 days from that day, it'd be August 20th on Av 12. July 12th, Tammuz 2, I had the vision of the people made out of mud. There were people like a mud war or mud army down below, and then there was a mud army up above, and I was crawling up through the mud, and it was as if I was the only person made out of, had life breathed into me. After that, I had a dream of my friends crying, and they were all going homeless, and we were all helping one another, and we were in a house. I believe the house represented God's house, and we were sleeping in sleeping bags on the hard ground. And the word parachute was given to me, and there's a street preacher who talks about how we are sinners and how we're in need of saving, and we are not good people because we have sinned, and so therefore we need a Savior, and our Savior Jesus Christ is our parachute. Let's say if you jump out of a plane, you don't do it without a parachute because you need something to fall back on. If you admit that you're not a sinner, you have no parachute, and so you have to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior or God's Son. And then I was shown June 11th. So going back to June 11th, you got to take 2 steps back to go 5 steps forward, right? So Savan 1, or the third month, is June 11th. Eid al-Fitr, breaking the Ramadan fast. That day, Michael was swallowed by a whale. And then 40 days from that day would be July 21st, or Tammuz 11. And 70 days from that date would be August 20th, or Av 12. So it seems like it's pointing to Av 12 when Noah sends out the raven and dove out of the ark, and the dove comes back. So July 21st be 40 days since Michael was swallowed by the whale. And that's 98 days after April 15th or Nisan 2, or 14 weeks after April 15th or Nisan 2. And on that day, Nisan 2, they prepared the first red heifer, tongue twister, biblically in the beginning. And then going on to August 20th, Av 12, that's the day Noah sends raven and dove out of the ark, and the dove comes back, which is 40 days after July 11th, Tammuz 1, when Noah saw the tops of the mountains, the first day of the fourth month. And that's 70 days after Michael was swallowed by a whale. And then I found more revelation about the 2 cows. I found out that they were both born 5 days apart, one on September 20th, Elul 13 of this year, but 7 years ago, it was Tishri 27, or September 20th. The first black cow with the fancy 7 on its head was born, which means 7 years of abundance. 7 years after that would be September 20th, or Elul 13. Then going down to September 25th, 7 years ago to the day, this year is Elul 18, would be the 7 years since the brown cow with the plain 7 was born, which means 7 years of famine. And this starts on the beginning of the 12 days of reflection. And in 22 days after that, Noah would send the dove out again, and it wouldn't come back. And this day is 70 days since Jonah Hayden was saved from the rubble. I found out that the mystery of the Shemitah and precursors to bad things happening on the day that Jonah Hayden was saved from the rubble on June 25th, the super blood moon, or the strawberry full super moon eclipse, happened that day. And then I found out, I had the previous stream of Thanksgiving and the rapture happening during that day. I found out that the Feast of Tabernacles is the Jewish Thanksgiving, which starts on October 21st, or Tishri 15. Sukkot and the fruit harvest that night, which it would be 40 days after the World Trade Center fell on 9/11, and 15 days after removing the Ark, covering October 7th, Tishri 1. Most people don't know that Jesus started his ministry on September 11th. And then, going down to 8 days after that, which should be the 8 days, brings us to Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day of Tabernacles, of living in booths and gathering branches under God's order. Mathematical geometry aspect, I've been being shown the Merkaba, which is the two triangles in verse. My previous Rapture dream, I was shown the entire sky covered in a screen, and it kind of looked like this cover for the movie. I watched Earth to Echo. It's kind of like a geometric mathematical kids movie of mandalas. And then I was shown the Rub el Hizb, but in the Bible it is the seal of Melchizedek, and it doesn't have this circle in the center. What I was shown is what's the window to heaven, or the window through Jesus Christ. And that's kind of what I was shown. 3 of them intertwined in each getting smaller. The seal of Melchizedek has 4 layers of symbolism traditional to the Judeo-Christian culture. And every Christmas we put a star on top of the Christmas tree to represent Christ. And it all leads to the morning star, and or the Day of Atonement with Jesus Christ. And then there's a Merkaba in 2D. It shows 2 squares, 2-dimensional squares, 2 by 2, inverse into one another. And then in my previous Rapture dream, when I was in my trailer, the horn blew. I went outside, and there was a different dimension. And I saw the Ophanim flying way up in the clear blue sky, flying west. And then I was brought up by the 4 angels into a cloud, and there was red, green, blue squares like confetti in the clouds, and I was trying to make it through, but I couldn't. And I found this video on YouTube of sunflowers and the Fibonacci sequence from the Mathologer, and he goes to talk about how sunflower seeds go out
below. There's a bit of asymmetry,
and
so
how they grow out of the very center in the Fibonacci sequence. And then
the next one's going to squeeze in. You can also see these,
he talks about the 3 or 4 different golden angles that grow out of the sunflower in those colors. And so he came to the conclusion that green plus red equals blue with the golden ratios. And those are the same exact confetti that I saw when I was in my Rapture dream. Now, I don't agree with everything about spirit science because it refutes Christianity, as well as actually it refutes all religions. Christianity, I was shown Jesus. I've seen miracles in his name, and Jesus is part of the new covenant that God has created for earth. Jesus is God's Son who came in the flesh to take away our sins. But here is the description of the flower of life and how God created the dimensions, the first day, second day, light, etc. So here it is.
Everything in the universe is geometric, whether it's people, trees, cats, planets, solar systems, stars, you name it. Anything in the universe can be measured on a geometric scale. Having said that, it's important to note that creation is also geometric. What we're going to be looking at today is the pattern of creation. Essentially what this means is that everything in the universe comes out of this single pattern. I'm not making this up. This single image will change everything. When I mentioned in Lesson 5 that the ancient Egyptians and even more ancient civilizations knew about a deeper, basic understanding of the universe, this is the flower of life. And it is also the creation pattern of everything in existence. Even non-tangible things, emotions, thoughts, music in its entire spectrum, everything comes from this image. Okay, so there are 13 information systems that comes out of the flower of life. Today, I'm going to show you how physical reality can manifest itself, which is just one of the 13 systems. In future lessons, we will look at more. It's also important to note that at first it may not make sense. I ask that you do not choose immediately to shut this out, and just watch with an open mind, and try and see this in a new way. Also, I want to tell you that by learning about sacred geometry simply by observing, you are absorbing only a very minuscule amount of information. If you really want to learn more, you must begin to draw it yourself. I kid you not, when you do this, you begin to see things in a new way. You begin to understand why things are done in the way that they are done. Promise. And Iceland. It's also been recorded to have been found in England, Tibet, Japan, Sweden, Lapland, the Yucatan, and I think 14 other places. This thing is everywhere. Not only that, but everywhere around the world it has the same name, the flower of life. Now, to understand the flower of life, first we have to talk about how it's formed. This could get incredibly complex, so I'll try and keep it simple. Imagine consciousness, or spirit, floating in a void, which means it's nothingness, and then spirit. No physical body or mind, just spirit, and that's it. Then blackness, essentially nothing, all around the spirit, for infinite. Spirit decides to do something, so it expands its consciousness all around itself as far as it can go without moving. It creates a sphere around itself. This is the first circle in the flower of life. Then, spirit has an awareness of what's around itself in 360 degrees. It moves to the very edge of the sphere anywhere and repeats what it did the first time. It creates this image, which also creates the Vesica Pisces. Within the Vesica Pisces is a vast and incredible amount of knowledge about width, proportion, depth. Also comes the square roots of 2, 3, and 5, which are all numbers that go on forever. But even more interestingly, comes geometric information about light. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, spirit has no choice but to do it again. Spirit is flawless, and therefore it will move flawlessly, creating the next circle either here or here, exactly one radius away from the other circle next to it. Every time spirit moves another sphere, more and more knowledge comes out of the image that is created. The first complete image to be formed is this. It has two names, the seed of life, or the Genesis pattern, and for good reason. Now, let's look at the book of Genesis for a second. Each of these movements, or creations of circles, can be seen as another day. On the first movement, the second sphere, it created knowledge about not only mathematical proportions, but light. The first sentence of Genesis says, "The earth was without form and void, and that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." In the very next sentence, God says, "Let there be light." The key here is in the order. The movement happened first, then light happened immediately after. Well, but what about the waters? Well, you have to remember that the Bible has been changed over time a lot. The ancient Egyptians would say that the way our modern Bibles begin creation is impossible, especially if you think about it from a physics point of view. Imagine a dark, infinite space that goes on forever and ever in all directions. You're just floating there with nothing. You can't really fall, but where would you fall to? From a purely physics or mathematical point of view, motion itself, or kinetic energy, is absolutely impossible in a void. You can't even rotate, because motion cannot become real unless there is one other object in the space around you. So the ancient Egyptians would say that before God moved upon the face of the waters, it would first have to create something to move relative to. So, Genesis pattern, after 3 spheres, you get the Holy Trinity. Another interesting one, it says in many Bibles of the world, not just the Christian Bible, that on the 4th day of Genesis, exactly 1/2 of creation was completed. Starting from the first motion, exactly 1/2 of the circles were formed on the 4th day. 5th day of Genesis, 6th circle, more information, and then on the 6th day, a geometric miracle takes place. The last circle forms a complete 6-petaled flower. This is what many earlier Bibles meant when they said, "In the beginning there were 6." Our Bible even said creation was formed in 6 days, and this fits exactly. This is the pattern of Genesis, and so it's called the Genesis pattern. It's also the beginning of the creation of the universe that we live in. These original movements of spirit are really important, but now let's look at something even cooler. Another image that comes out of this pattern is this. It's called the Tree of Life. Many may recognize this as the Jewish or Hebrew Kabbalah, but the Kabbalah did not originate this image, and there is proof. The Tree of Life does not belong to any culture, not even the Egyptians, who carved the Tree of Life on 2 sets of 3 pillars at Karnak Temple, Luxor, over 5,000 years ago. It's outside any race or religion, as with all of these images. They are patterns that are intimately connected with nature. You'll also notice that every circle on the Tree of Life is either the length or width of the Vesica Pisces. The second image beyond Genesis in the Flower of Life is the Egg of Life. This is formed during the second vortex motion. Upon its completion, it creates an image like this, a 3-dimensional shape that you can hold in your hand. If you were to connect their centers, you would see a cube. So what? Who cares? Well, the ancient Egyptians did, because they were concerned with creation, life, and death. They called this cluster of spheres the Egg of Life. You probably won't believe me just yet, but this shape is the morphogenic structure that created your body. Your entire physical existence is dependent on the Egg of Life structure, and everything about you was created from that form. Everything from your eye color to how long your fingers are. This is a whole lesson on its own, so let's move on for now. All around the world, the Flower of Life was always made the exact same way. See, this pattern can clearly go on forever. However, they always stopped after 19 circles. Why? Well, because they didn't want you to see what I'm about to show you. Back then, this image and knowledge was so sacred that they couldn't allow it to become common knowledge. It was appropriate at that time. However, now we either use the information or fall further into darkness. In biology, all cells have a zona pellucida around the edge. These circles around the Flower of Life are the zona pellucida of the Flower of Life. You must remove these, then complete the spheres that were cut off by the Zona Pellucida. With one more step, you will have the secret. Finish the drawing, add the final missing circles, giving you this. This image is the fruit of life. This pattern of 13 circles is one of the holiest, most sacred forms in existence. It's called the fruit because it is the result, the fruit, from which the fabric of the details of the reality were created. Remember when we talked about male and female energy, lesson 4? As you can see, this image is female. It has no straight lines. However, when you combine male lines with these female circles, something amazing happens. What you do is draw a straight line from the very center of every single circle to every other circle in this image. When you do this, you get an image which is known throughout the universe, everywhere, as Metatron's cube. It is one of the most important informational systems in the universe, one of the basic creation patterns in existence. So what is Metatron's cube? Well, anyone who has studied sacred geometry, or even regular geometry for that matter, knows that there are 5 unique shapes in the universe, and that they are crucial to understanding both regular and sacred geometry. They are called the Platonic solids. A Platonic solid has certain characteristics by definition. First of all of its faces are the same size. For example, a cube, the most well-known Platonic solid, has a square on every face, so all of its faces are the same size. Secondly, the edges of the Platonic solids are all the same length. All edges of the cube are the same length. Third, it only has one size of interior angles between the faces. In the case of the cube, this angle is 90 degrees. And fourth, when put inside of a sphere, all of the points will touch the edge of the sphere perfectly. With that definition, there are only 4 shapes besides the cube that fit that description. So what are they? Well, we have the dodecahedron, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the isosahedron, and the hexahedron. All of these shapes are found within Metatron's cube. This knowledge is also where original alchemy came from. The ancient alchemists and great souls like Pythagoras, father of Greece, considered each shape to have an elemental aspect to them. The tetrahedron was considered fire, the cube was earth, the octahedron was air, the isosahedron was water, and the dodecahedron was ether. Ether, also known as prana, and tachyon energy are all the same thing. They extend anywhere and are accessible at any point in space, time, and dimension. This is the great secret of zero-point technology. The sphere is voidness. These 6 elements are the building blocks of the universe, and they create the qualities of the universe. To summarize, this is the first informational system that comes out of the fruit of life through Metatron's cube. In alchemy, they rarely discussed ether. I've read that in the Pythagorean school, if you even uttered the word dodecahedron outside of the school, they would kill you on the spot. That's how sacred this shape was. 200 years later, when Plato was alive, he would discuss it, but only very carefully. This is because the dodecahedron is near the outer edge in your energy field, and is the highest form of consciousness. There's quite a bit more here, but I don't think I can go much further on it right now. Anyways, recognize this? The periodic table of elements? Every single element on this table has a geometric relation to one of these 5 shapes. Modern scholars ridiculed this idea until the 1980s, when Professor Robert Moon at the University of Chicago demonstrated that the entire periodic table of elements, literally everything in the physical world, is based on these same 5 forms. In fact, throughout modern physics, chemistry, and biology, the sacred geometric patterns of creation are being rediscovered. Another example is the egg of life that I showed you earlier. Hopefully that will help you to understand just how incredible and important of a discovery this truly is. Everything that modern science knows about the elements and reality are tied together through the Platonic solids, which come out of Metatron's cube, which is formed out of the fruit of life, which comes from the flower of life, which is made by spirit. Damn. Whether you're convinced yet or not, this is the missing piece of the puzzle. It all comes down to spirit. Don't forget, this is just one of 13 informational systems that created the universe.
So I was shown how the Fibonacci sequence relates to the heart symbol. I was shown the Metatron's cube as well. I was shown the flower of life. And the flower of life directly relates to God and the Ophanim around him, which are the eyes. All of those eyes you see around are his eyes of the Ophanim. And then on the Lauren Child of God channel, her daughter was whispered into her ear 75 geometry. And I was trying to tie that into the Fibonacci sequence, but I only found 76. So I was looking further into it, and I found about Lucas numbers. I found out about the Fibonacci flower formula with the 3 different golden curves. And I was shown the Holy Trinity right there. How it relates to 90 degrees. 75 degrees is opposite of 15 degrees, which brings you to 90 degrees. I'm showing different angles and different geometry. I typed in the 144 and 90, which is the golden ratio, and that gets you the Fibonacci sequence, 1.618034. And then I was brought to this video right here, and
through the whole thing. So that radius goes around the circle 6 times, and as it intersects itself, it makes what we call like a lip shape, but we're going to call it a petal. So there's 6 petals in the middle and 6 petals on the outside. So we can say that one frequency flower of life has 12 petals. And then what's interesting is, so we know that the overall shape has 90 petals, and we're going to analyze the stages. But most people have never looked at the gap between the form. So in between the petals is a curved triangle. I'll just call it a triangle. But there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we can say that there's 12 petals and there's 6 triangles in the first stage of the flower of life. And so we're going to hold that information. Speed of light at its maximum is 144,000 minutes of arc per grid second. And in harmonics, we're allowed to drop the zeros. So the speed of light, which Einstein called c, is 144,000 minutes of arc per grid second. But when you drop off the zeros, we're left with harmonic 144. So this is really interesting because the ancients measured measurements in what we call nautical miles. So 144,000 nm or nautical miles is the correct way to measure the sacred sites around the planet. So this flower of life, the mother of all form, the blueprint of creation, is a shadow of a 3-dimensional construct of the sacred sites around the earth. So I'm calling it flower of life equals speed of light.
So Spirit is God, and Jesus is the Son of God, or the Son of Spirit. So I was led to show this to you. Here's another thing about God's chosen people in the 144,000, which directly relates to the flower of life. And, well, here it is.
So check this out. Look at the craftiness of most of those who translated the Bible. I'm going to say a couple things to you that's going to help you realize. Now, I'm going to post a link below this video of the video that I did explaining Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8, and how the proper translation is the sons of God, not the sons of Israel. And when you read the context, you see that it doesn't even make sense to read it as the sons of Israel. The proper translation is the sons of God. Why would they change it to the sons of Israel, even though the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are older than the Hebraic artifact that they found, translates it as, reads as the sons of God? Why would they change it to the sons of Israel?
But let's see if you guys will stick with me here. So today, someone commented on a video that I posted a long time ago about God's fingerprint in nature. He said it's a great video. And I rewatched the video. And as I was rewatching the video, something hit me. Now, this is going to be something that atheists would find interesting, but I know how the atheists are. No matter what, they just would not believe. So this video isn't really for the atheists. It's for us who already believe. But it's something very interesting in the Bible that shows the Fibonacci sequence, which is termed as God's fingerprint in nature. Now, God's fingerprint in nature, this code that was found, was discovered in the medieval times and has been more profound today, as is found more and more in different things found in nature. But yet this sequence was already coined by Yeshua, our master, with the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, let me I just want you guys to pay attention to something. And what you're watching now, this isn't really what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about something beyond this. And you're going to understand, but just keep watching.
What we are seeing is intelligent design, which might be described as God's fingerprints upon nature. One of the more fascinating math relationships was first described back in medieval times, 8 centuries ago. The scholar's name was Leonardo Fibonacci, an outstanding Italian mathematician. he excelled in many areas, and one in particular. He generated a long list of numbers by, in each case, adding together the two previous numbers. You can begin with a 2 and a 3. You add them together and you get 5. Now add 3 and 5 to get 8. Then add 5 and 8 to get 13. The Fibonacci sequence keeps going like this: 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, and so on. What Fibonacci realized.
Now, most patterns ends at 144, which is why they're stopping at 144. And the image they're about to show you is going to stop at 144, which is the image of a seashell. And the pattern of the galaxies, and the pattern of rose petals, and the patterns of sunflowers. Right now, the 12 tribes of Israel. Why is it 12 tribes? We always had this question about, why does God keep choosing 12 disciples? Christ chose 12 disciples. God chooses 12 tribes to become the nation of Israel. And 12,000 out of each tribe, which is 12,000 out of each tribe of Israel, which is 12 total tribes, makes 144,000 individuals. Right? Now, if you start from the 1, because 0 is 0, so 0 doesn't count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the Fibonacci sequence. And if that's not convincing enough, it ends at 144 when it gets to the 12th number. So that's 12,000 out of each tribe, which is 144,000. Now, why this is so significant is that this sequence is the sequence that God has fashioned most of the things on earth after, and even the universe that's around us. As this video will continue to show you, it's the spiral of the galaxies above us, is the spiral of the solar system, is the spiral of seashells of your ear, your inner ear, is a spiral of things within your body, is a spiral of things all around us. So this means that this pattern governs us. Right? Now, if this pattern governs us, which it does, it makes sense that God is choosing this same sequence of individuals to go to heaven to make up the 144,000, to rule with Christ over the earth, because this sequence is what governs the earth. Do you guys see what I'm seeing? So keep listening real quick, and I'll expand later.
What Fibonacci realized was that this elegant list of numbers describes many items to be found in nature. For example, flower petals.
L'exemple des pétales d'une marguerite. Vous dites, il n'y a pas de hasard au nombre de pétales d'une marguerite.
Non, absolument. Le nombre de pétales de marguerite est en fait inscrit dans un scénario.
That there is a mathematically precise structure to the universe and everything in it. One everyday example of this precision can be found in the plants. Many plants, including elm trees, grow their leaves, twigs and branches placed exactly halfway around the stem from each other. Next in the series are plants like the beech tree, with leaves placed 1/3 of the way around the stem from the previous leaves. Third in the series are the plants like the oak, with leaves placed at every 2/5 of a turn. The holly plant is the next at 3/8, while the larch trees are the next at 5/13. And the sequence goes on and on. Notice the number sequence of these fractions: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. Each number is the sum of the two numbers which came just before it in the sequence. This particular mathematical pattern is called the Fibonacci series.
Take, for example, the sunflower. The display of its florets are in perfect spirals of 55, 34, and 21. The sequence of Fibonacci, the sequence of Fibonacci, the sequence of Fibonacci, the sequence of Fibonacci.
Now, if you go back and see my previous videos, I made a video of my prophetic dreams about sunflowers turning into trees, and then sweet manna coming from it, and me getting anointed with manna before me having the prophetic dream of receiving the white stone with the heavenly seal and a new name only I know.
There is a mathematically precise structure to the universe and everything within it. Now, the 144,000, what's the whole point of God choosing 12,000 out of each tribe of Israel? What's the point of that? Now, he's not just doing something through just coincidence or randomness. No, just as much as the universe, he did not create the universe through random chance, but everything has a structure. And coincidentally, or not coincidentally, systematically, it has the same structure that ends in 144,000 as on the 12th number, precisely on the 12th number. Oh, and this video is 12 minutes and 12 seconds long. Well, that's just it. Anyway, on the 12th, the 12th number is 144,000. Now, if this is the number that governs the universe, which God has used to govern the universe, so that so many things fashion itself after this Fibonacci sequence, then it would make sense that since mankind has deviated from the natural order that God created us to pattern ourselves after, it would only make sense that he would send that same number of individuals to heaven to govern us, to get us back to perfection during the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Now, that 144,000, the 12 apostles are part of the anointed, right? That's why Christ chose 12 apostles to fashion after the anointed, which is why when Judas lost his spot as one of the 12, now it's only 11, right? The first century Christians came together to choose who will replace Judas's spot. This is in the Bible, okay? And they had two candidates. The first century Christians had two candidates. Again, this is in the Bible. And through the help of the Holy Spirit, they chose one out of the two candidates to replace Judas's spot. So the 144,000 is so limited that when people lose their spots, someone else has to take that spot, because that's a seat in heaven that someone has to fill, right? So Judas lost his spot, but someone else filled Judas's spot. So the 144,000, what are they going to do? They are going to heaven to do what? Christ says, he spoke to the 12 apostles. He says, you are my friends, and God has given me my throne in heaven, and I am going there to prepare a place for you to come and stay with me, to rule with me as kings, priests, and judges over the earth. So the reason why the number is 144,000 is because of the pattern that God has put on the earth already. So it makes sense. I mean, it's hard for me to explain what I'm thinking, but I hope if you guys are on the same page as me, you already understood what I was trying to get to from the get-go. Like, as soon as I mentioned the Fibonacci, as soon as you saw the Fibonacci code, you already knew where I was going to with that. And props to you if you had that foresight. That means we're on the same page, and you're not dumb, basically. Now, check this out.
For most of human history, people have believed in some kind of spiritual realm that exists alongside the world as we know it.
Right, and the biblical authors are no exception.
Yeah, for them, the spiritual realm is a different kind of realm than ours. And to highlight that difference, the Bible refers to God's space as the sky or the heavens.
Because the sky is really different from the land. It's above and beyond. And up there are shiny bodies that move around.
The truth is not popular, right? That's okay. But today on the Sabbath, look, someone commented on my video, and I was able to connect the dots between the Fibonacci code, the sequence that governs the earth, and 144,000 who are going to heaven, who are going to govern the earth, right? You see that path? You see that correlation? And then my friend Franco sends me a video, coincidentally, about this thing where it speaks about the divine council in heaven who were created by God to govern the earth, but they've lost their spots by joining the devil in his agenda. And so because of that, the 144,000 which God has chosen from the earth who are going to heaven are going to replace the divine council who lost their spots, and they will be the new ones who would govern the earth. So my friend didn't send me that with that in his mind, but God caused him to send me this video for me to connect the dots even more about the 144,000 and what they are really going to do in heaven. So if you guys have the patience, just keep watching.
I think of these as flaming gas balls.
But when the biblical authors looked up, the stars gave them a way to talk and think about spiritual beings. In the Bible, they're called the sons of God, or the rulers and authorities, or even sometimes the divine council.
So that sounds really important. What does the divine council do?
Well, they're introduced in Genesis chapter 1, where they're called the host of heaven, that is, the sun, moon, and stars. And there, they're also called signs, meaning that their power and status symbolizes and points to God's power and status.
Yeah, so in Genesis 1, God appoints them to rule over the day and night.
Exactly. And then later in the Bible, we're told that they were celebrating God's power and creativity when he created the world.
Like the...
I'm just going to interject here real quick. They say signs. Now, if you've never heard of this, there's something called a monad, which is a sine wave, which is a negative one, and a positive one, which block each other out, which is a zero. Now, they've found that the monad is a continuous energy that cannot be created or destroyed, and it is basically the soul of the body that we're given by God. And there's this video I watched, this person named Morg. It's just like a pseudo religion that he made. He was a street performer or stage performer, and I don't agree with him. I agree with Christianity 100%. But here's a description of what a monad is and the sign.
A monad is another word for eternal mind. They're the same thing, and that's exactly what you are. That's what I am too. We are all monads. Our real selves aren't what we see in the mirror. We're not physical beings at all, not truly. You are an eternal mind, made up of non-physical mental content, which links to a physical body and controls it. And since this eternal mind is also what we call a monad, then we can reasonably conclude that a monad is the real you. Monad is a Greek word which means unit. Monads are individual units of mind. You can think of these units as containers because they contain thoughts. In fact, they contain an infinite amount. Monads are infinite, and since you are a monad, that means you are infinite too. It might be helpful to visualize each monad like an egg. Each egg is its own unit, but inside of each egg is a vast amount of information. Not only do these eggs contain a vast amount of information, the containers themselves are also vast in number. A myriad of monads exist. It's also important to note that these units not only contain thoughts, but are actually made of thoughts. In a mental universe, it can't be any other way. Everything is made of mind, and everything reduces to mind. So in a very real sense, the container is the content. Remember that comparing a monad to an egg is just an analogy, so we can better visualize this concept. In reality, an egg would be a physical object that you could measure and hold in your hands. But a monad is actually dimensionless. It has no dimension and it can't be measured. We can't see it, just as we can't see thoughts. Monads belong to the mental domain, which means they exist outside of space and time. All the monads in existence are here in the mental realm we call the source. Nothing in the source has physical dimension or extension. We would say this domain of mind is unextended because nothing there can be measured with a ruler. In Hyperianism, we know that the fundamental building blocks of the universe must be mental in nature. They must be dimensionless. But how can our monads be containers for an infinite amount of mental content, yet still be dimensionless and take up no space? Glad you asked. It's because all of the information a monad contains ultimately balances to perfect zero. Here, we're dealing with the beauty of mathematical symmetry through the union of opposites. Every thought within a monad has a number associated with it. If every possible number also has its opposite accounted for inside a monad, the total nets to zero. Think of +1 and -1 combining to make 0. 0 takes up no space. Nothing can prevent a 0 from existing because it requires nothing outside of itself to create it. And because it can't be created, it cannot be destroyed. This loaded 0 is what a monad is. It's what your mind is. 0 is eternal. Your mind, your monad, is eternal. And all the thoughts and information that we've been talking about, you know, what a monad is composed of, well, to be more specific, these are actually mathematical waves of differing frequencies, all balancing to zero, of course. Now, the big question that arises from all of this is, where do these waves come from? Surely there must be a reason why a monad would contain all this mathy stuff while still being equivalent to zero. Come to think of it, what do these mental monads have to do with our everyday world of matter anyway?
Now, it's said that the sacred societies know about the monad and the secret of consciousness, and the secret society starting in ILL and ending in ATI, and they're trying to use it for nefarious purposes, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Now back to the other video. Sorry for the video inception, the video inside of a video.
Claim that there's more to the scripture than people realize, and that just like when God made humans, right? He told humans to have in subjection everything on the earth. The animals, the flowers, the plants, everything is under our feet, right? We are to take care of the earth and make the whole world a paradise, and have in subjection all the animals, the fish, the birds, everything, all the creeping things, the insects, everything, right? They are under our dominion. So we are the rulers. Mankind is the ruler of the earth. We are not rulers over each other. No, we are rulers over what God has put on the earth, right? So all the animals have a form of God's image, but they do not have the complete form of God's image. Only mankind does. So since they have a form of God's image, God is giving mankind authority over these other spirit beings that are not in the full image of God, and so they can be governed over, right? So that's our dominion. But the angels have dominion over us. Okay, the angels have dominion over us just as much as we have dominion over the things on the earth. The angels have dominion over all the things on the earth. And in the Bible, God said that. Let me paraphrase. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. Those of you who have not seen that video will not really understand what I'm saying here. But hopefully God will help you to see that video and understand where I'm going to with this. But in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Moses said that God divided the nations of the world according to his heavenly court, according to his heavenly realm, or according to the sons of God, right? And you would say that no, it's according to the sons of Israel. Well, you would have to watch that video for me to understand why that translation is completely inaccurate and false. Man, see, like I said, this video is going to be all over the place. But no, there is a divine council in heaven, which is why at the time of Ahab, which is going to be spoken about in this video real quick, but in the time of Ahab, there was a divine council in heaven where God asked who will fool Ahab. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that because it's going to make this video longer than it's supposed to, and a lot of you don't have the long attention span to even stay till this point of the video. Like at the time of Job too, there was a divine council, which Satan entered up into that divine council, and God questioned Satan, where are you coming from? Okay, God holds meetings in the heavens. There is a heavenly court. There is a heavenly realm of judges. But these heavenly beings betrayed God and followed the devil in his agenda, which is why in the book of Revelation, it says that the great dragon dragged a third of the stars from heaven, meaning he influenced a third of God's sons. The stars are alluding to God's sons, okay? Which is why this video is speaking about the sons and stars are actually the sons of God. It's twofold. The meaning is twofold. It's the literal sons and the stars and all of that, but it's also speaking about the actual sons of God at the same time. So when the dragon drew a third of the stars, it means he influenced these rulers whom God has put to rule over the earth. Just like mankind fell and they didn't obey God and they went renegade, so too these rulers that God put over the earth, they went renegade and followed the devil in the devil's agenda. And so because they lost their spot, God is going to replace them with people from the earth, and he's going to give them the very thing that they lost. And he's going to give Christ the very thing that the devil wanted, which is worship and kingship and all authority.
All right, so a quick note, 144,000 was 1/3 of the heavenly council, so there must be 432,000. And I went and I looked at 432 in the Bible, it says, Acts 4:32, all the believers were in one heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. So that means the entire body of Christ, the church, needs to all come together in one heart and mind in order to defeat the enemy.
And Christ is going to share this authority with his friends. And the sequence is followed after the same sequence that governs the earth, which is the Fibonacci code, which ends at 144,000 at the 12th number. You see?
God's power and creativity when he created the world.
Like the cheering section of a game.
Yeah, right. There are also stories in the Bible where God invites the divine council to participate in making a decision. Like when they help decide how to bring down the corrupt Israelite king Ahab. Or in the book of Job, where they debate God's policy of rewarding people who do good.
So they're like God's staff team. But why does God need a team? If he's powerful enough to create the whole universe, he could surely rule it without any help.
Well, he doesn't need them. But apparently, the God of the Bible wants to share authority with others.
Oh, right. God shares his rule with human partners on earth. And so, in the same way, there's a parallel story of God sharing his authority to rule with spiritual partners.
Yes, that is, until it all falls apart in a twin rebellion. So you have humans who want to rule on earth on their own terms. So they start building their own nation using their own definitions of good and evil.
Yeah, the famous story of the building of Babylon.
But check this out. When biblical authors like Moses or Isaiah looked back at the origins of Babylon, they saw more than just a human rebellion, but also a spiritual rebellion.
What was this spiritual rebellion?
Well, there were members of the divine council who, like the humans, didn't want to represent God's authority anymore.
I'm going to interject again. Okay, so previously I read the Bible. I had Jesus exorcised me. I had a dream that night of a girl in a hospital robe and a birthmark. That girl got into my cab. She had the birthmark. I caught it on video. You can go back to my other videos and see it. But she told me that her mom was playing with the Ouija board when she was in her womb. She caught this thing on her nanny cam interacting with her kid in his crib 5 seconds after her husband left the room. So that thing that you just saw, you're going to see it in real life. It's one of the fallen. It called itself Ozue, or warrior, in Cherokee. Now, back to the video.
Who, like the humans, didn't want to represent God's authority anymore. They wanted to be God, and they rebelled. And so these created beings deceived humans into worshiping them instead of the Creator. And so Babylon becomes the biblical image for the combined human and spiritual rebellion.
And so God scatters the people from Babylon into different nations.
And in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says, this is when God also scattered the rebels of the divine council with them.
So the nations are handed over to spiritual rulers.
Yes, and this is why when the biblical prophets look out at the violent empires of their day, they see two dimensions to all the chaos and injustice. Human rebels who are being corrupted by the worship of spiritual rebels.
For example, so that you guys know that this isn't all fable, this is why the god of Persia resisted the angel of God whom God sent to deliver a message to Daniel, and took 21 days because Daniel was in Persia, and there is a spirit realm of Persia. And so in order for the angel of God to get to Daniel, he would have to go through the prince of Persia, and the prince of Persia resisted him. So this means he is not with the agenda of God. He's against the agenda of God. And so Michael had to come and help this angel of God to go against the prince of Persia, you see. And even for that angel of God to leave the nation of Persia, he had to go in battle with another angel again, another demon actually. But they're all angels at the end of the day. So a lot goes on in the spirit realm that you guys don't understand. But just because you don't understand it, don't mean you should just throw it in the garbage. It is extremely valid. And hopefully you'll find that video that I made on this subject.
The idol gods of money, sex, and military power.
Yeah, when humans give their allegiance to these powers, it leads to a world like ours.
Right, and the best example of this is the story of the Exodus, where we're told that the Egyptian genocide of the Israelites was inspired by Pharaoh and by the gods of Egypt.
That's really intense.
But it's not the end of the story. When God rescued the Israelites from Egypt and its gods, he invited them to become his covenant partners and learn a different way of ruling the world.
And they agree to it, but in the end they don't honor the partnership. They give their allegiance to other gods.
And so this leads to their exile in Babylon, where they become slaves once again to a foreign nation and their spiritual rulers, awaiting a new exodus into freedom. And this is where the story of Jesus picks up. He said he was here to rescue the world and take it back from the rebels.
Which rebels? The human ones or the spiritual ones?
Exactly. For Jesus, it was all connected. When he marched into Jerusalem for Passover, he was announcing the ultimate exodus. He was there to confront and overcome all rebel powers and authorities, and he did it by giving up his life.
So this is what the Apostle Paul meant when he said that Jesus disarmed the powers and authorities, triumphing over them by the cross.
Yes, Jesus condemned our evil by allowing the rebels to unleash all their hate and evil on him. But then he overcame it with the power of his love and resurrection life. And then Jesus told his followers that all authority in heaven and earth now belongs to him.
Yeah, the ultimate human and divine partner. This is really...
Yes, and he wants to share this authority with his friends, who the total sum of them is 144,000, the 12th number of the Fibonacci sequence, and based off of the pattern of the Fibonacci sequence. You see? So basically, the point of this video is not even about all that I just talked about. The point of it is, this Fibonacci sequence was discovered in the Middle Ages. Meanwhile, this Fibonacci sequence is what governs the world and the patterns that the world takes, right? Including the universe, the galaxies around us, and the rose petals and everything, right? And within our own bodies. It governs our world. How fitting then that God chooses this same number of individuals based off of the Fibonacci sequence, based off of the numbers that govern us and the pattern that governs us. How fitting that God chooses this same amount of people to literally govern the world during the millennial reign of Christ. Right? See, and because the world belongs to the devil, that's why the devil was able to offer this temptation to Christ, to hopefully that Christ would, submit and fall like the other stars of heaven. But Christ is so close to the Father and loves the Father so much that he could never waver in his trust to God. And he said he would rather wait for God to give him all authority than for the devil to give him this flimsy authority of just ruling the world. Right? So again, that kind of tells you that Christ is not God. I mean, the devil is going to tempt God with something that already belongs to God. Everything belongs to God. And the devil knows who Christ is. The devil knows that Christ is not God. That's why he could dare try and tempt Christ with something as flimsy as the nations of the world. Because you can't tempt God with anything. It doesn't matter if Christ is God in the flesh, you can't tempt him with anything. Maybe you could tempt him with women, okay, fine, because he's a man, okay? But you're going to tempt God with the nations of the world, something that already belongs to God? What type of temptation is that? That's an easy temptation for Christ if Christ is God. But it's not an easy temptation if Christ is not God, just as much as it wasn't an easy temptation for the divine council in heaven who left God, who fell for the devil's bait. Because they are not God, so they can fall for that. They were able to be influenced by the devil's tail, and they followed the devil's agenda. Christ could have been influenced too, which is why the devil tried to get Christ to fall. But Christ did not fall because he loves God. But he is not God. That tells you something, people. Man, am I the only one who could think this deep? Goodness gracious. All right, I'll end it at that. Later.
But theism is the biblical philosophy, and theism says God not only created the world then, but he controls it now. I've met some Christians who believe any miracle if it's bound in black leather. But miracles today, they don't believe.